Hi, Jesse with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at, and I'll show you how to install the Roadmaster Direct Fit base plate with removable arms on our 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe. There's 5 main components when looking to set up your vehicle for flat tow, starting with the base plate. That's going to be your structural mounting point on the towed vehicle that will connect to your motorhome through the next component, which is your tow bar here. That's the physical link between the two. Then we have our braking, and that will allow you to use the vehicle's brakes so you're safer on the road. You're not just relying solely on the motorhome's brakes. It's going to let you come to a nice controlled stop. Then our diode wiring, which is there to send a signal from the taillights on the motorhome to the taillights on your towed vehicle. That again will keep you safe on the road. It's going to allow other drivers to know what you're doing. And last, we have our safety cables here. These are here just as a last resort in case of a catastrophic disconnect. If everything gets disconnected, these are here. You can control your vehicle and get pulled over on the side of the road. Here's what our base plate looks like when you're ready to hit the road. Everything's hooked up. You'll see your arms come out. Super easy to hook your tow bar up to them. And your safety cable loops here, also super easy with these S-style clips. They slide right on there. On its own, not being towed, you would have these arms off. They come off super easy. You just pull this pin back and make a quarter turn. And then to install, you just push it in and quarter turn, and that pin will lock into place. Then we'll take our tow bar here, get the arm lined up with the hole, slide your pin in. You want to slide it in this way because this is where your clip lines up. Put your pin down and close the clip. I think it's a really good option, especially if you have the lower shutter system behind your grill here. This is one of the only options out there that will actually install over that and you don't have to remove it. So I think if you have the lower shutters, this is definitely the way to go. Also, it looks really clean once it's installed. If you're driving the Jeep around, I think it looks good. It's a nice clean finish, and Roadmaster makes quality products, so you shouldn't have to worry there. As far as the install goes, there's quite a few steps. You do have to remove the fascia and do some trimming, and then you will have to cut up your bumper beam here just to make room. But if you just sit there, take your time, and make sure you do every step one at a time, it's definitely a doable project. If it's not something that you're ready to do yourself, maybe you don't have all the tools or the space or the time, feel free to check out our dealer locator. However, if you are ready to tackle this project yourself, feel free to follow along our video and I'll show you how we set up ours. We're going to begin our installation here under the hood. We need to take these top plastic pieces off. So we're just going to work our way down. We have a bunch of these plastic push pins. I'm using a push pin tool. You could also use a flathead screwdriver. This just makes things a little easier. So we're just going to start with the center part, get that lifted up, and then the entire pin should pop out. With all those fasteners removed, this panel should just lift up. We'll put that out of our way. Now we've revealed some Torx screws. These are T30. Get all those out. And after those Torx screws, we have 2 10mm bolts. They're on the outside. Now we're working in the wheel well here. We have 5 8mm bolts we need to remove. Now it looks like we have 2 of these plastic nuts. You can remove these with a 10mm socket. See one up top here, and then there's one against the side. Now with all those screws removed, we can peel back the wheel well liner. Let's peel that back, and now we're going to pull out. I went and grabbed a plastic trim tool to try to help. Should just be able to kind of help pull that fender trim straight out, and just work your way up through the clips. We don't need to take it all the way off, we just need to get to about this point. Take some shop rags and jam them in there just to separate that piece from the fascia. Now we have a bolt going through the fender of the vehicle holding our fascia on. It's a 10 millimeter. That out. Now everything we've done on this side we'll repeat on the other side. We need to unplug this electrical connector, so I'll just take a flathead screwdriver, pull that tab back. You can just give your screwdriver a twist, and then on that same white tab push it in, and the connector should pop right out. Now we're under the vehicle. We have some bolts to remove from the skid plates. We have 5 8mm screws in the front, and then there's 4 10mm screws along the back there. It looks like we have a couple more screws to remove behind the splitter here. There's going to be one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. They're 8mm. I'm pulling the skid plate down. We have 2 push pins to remove. It looks like this one already popped out, but I'll just pull it out so I can set it aside. One over there and one on the passenger side. For this step, it's a good idea to have an extra set of hands. I have my friend Brad here to help me. We're just going to start removing the fascia by pulling from the outside, then working our way in. Once we get to this point, we will have to lift up just to get over that rubber stopper. And as you pull out, it's a good idea to just make sure there's nothing getting hooked up or maybe any electrical connections. It looks like we're good, so we'll just set this aside for now. We did have 2 things that we needed to unhook to remove the fascia on the passenger side. This is your windshield washer hose. So it just has a little fitting that goes in here. You squeeze one side of it, the other side expands, and it should pop out. So I put a screw, and I also have a pair of vice grips with some tape to protect the hose, kind of clamping that, just so we're not leaking washer fluid the entire time. And then the other thing is this small electrical connector that just releases by pushing a pin down and sliding out. We're going to remove this bumper beam. We have a 10mm nut. It's going to be one on each side. And then we have 2 16mm bolts. One on top, one on bottom. And then we'll get those removed, and then we'll move on to the passenger side. When we get to the last nut on this side, just be sure to support the bumper beam so it doesn't come flying off. And we'll set this aside. We will not be reusing it. Now we need to remove these little alignment bolts on both sides. So you might just take a pair of channel locks, see if you can't spin it a little bit, and then take a hammer, try to tap it out the back. If you see it start to bend in like that, Maybe just try to kind of wiggle it back and forth. And it should slide up. Our next step is going to be to install these brackets. But you'll see here this little plastic piece is kind of in our way. So I'm just going to take some tin snips and make a cut into that. This is just some rubbery plastic, so it should cut pretty easily. As for our hardware with the bracket, we will use some blue Loctite. Every piece of hardware that we install will be getting a dab of blue Loctite. But we have our 10mm bolt, a washer, and a lock washer. And for our bracket, yours might not have a sticker that says driver, ours does. You'll just have to make sure that the notch here is facing the outside. So slide this into place and get our bolt started. We'll install this bolt and then a bolt on the bottom hole, just finger tight for now. And then on the passenger side, we'll have the same bracket with the same hardware. So I'm not seeing the trimming steps in the instructions, so I don't know if our model's a little different than what they've used before. But to install our cross member, I will have to trim this little plastic piece out. So first I'll unplug our ambient air sensor just to get it out of the way. I definitely don't want to cut into these wires at all. So I'm just going to tuck it up here in a safe spot for now. And then I'll take a multi-tool here. I'm just going to cut across here, then up, and another across. Now we need to do some cutting, but before we do that, we need to get a few things out of our way. This horn here, we need to get that and all the wires out of our way just so we're not cutting them. So there's a 10mm bolt holding the bracket on. Can remove that. And just kind of lift it out of there. Then we'll see a bunch of push pins holding the wiring in. So with your tool or screwdriver, work on popping all those out. We just need to get them all out of our way. So the last thing we want to do is cut through a wire harness. It's all right if they break. This last one. Now I'll try to hang up the horn over here. I might zip tie it down just so that way it pulls the wires away from this area where we'll be cutting. And then we need to remove the, I think it's a pedestrian monitor, some kind of alarm. We'll be relocating this. The kit comes with a bracket that we'll use later. I'm just going to hang all this over here with a zip tie. Here on the passenger side, we do need to retain this mounting tab for that alarm that we removed because it will be relocated using that. So just make sure when you mark it out, there's a diagram in the instructions. You'll mark it out just above that tab and right here. And we'll need to cut so that this is this front part is flush with this side piece. So just cut on that angle and then across here. I'm going to start with a Sawzall to do these cross cuts and then maybe a multi-tool or a angle grinder. But just work your way across. Now to mount the brackets, we'll be reusing the bolts that we removed to take the bumper beam off. Just be sure to add a dab of blue Loctite to all of the hardware we're using today. That'll keep everything nice and secure, keep these bolts from backing out. And we'll take our bracket. It's going to go with this little teardrop shape pointed up. It should slide right into place over our bumper beam holes. And we'll get those threaded on. Now we'll take our 16mm socket and snug these down on the passenger side and the driver's side. All right, so once we have these bolts tightened down, that gives us a nice template for the holes that we're going to drill. That will be a 17/32 drill bit. So we're just going to drill a hole here and a hole there. You could drill a pilot hole to help out, but I'm just going to use the large drill bit to start. This is pretty thin aluminum, so it cuts pretty easily. Now we need to drill 2 holes through our teardrop shape in our bracket. We just need to drill a hole big enough to slide our wire nuts in so that we can put 2 bolts through those holes that we drilled earlier and screw them into here. So I'll begin drilling. Just want to kind of get it as centered as you can. But again, it just needs to be large enough to slide that in. Once we have that hole drilled out, it's just a good idea to make sure these nuts will fit through. If your hole's a little too small, you could come in with a burr bit just to widen it out. But it looks like we got it on our first try, so I'll move on to the other side. Take our nuts, slide it through. You may have to turn it horizontal to get it up above the piece of metal in there. And then try to line it up with our hole here. Once that's lined up, we'll take our bolts and lock washer and get that threaded in. This may take some adjusting, but once you get everything lined up, it should thread on, then we'll move on to the other ones. Once we have all of our bolts hand threaded into our little wire nuts, we can tighten them down with a 3/4 inch socket. Now we'll need to torque all the bolts that we've installed so far down to the specification listed in the instructions. If you don't have your own torque wrench, we do have some available here at eTrailer, or you can always borrow one from a local auto parts store. So I'll just go through one by one, torque them down. And once you've torqued these 2, you can just wiggle your wire and it should pop off eventually. Now we'll take our crossbar and the larger bolts, large washer, lift this up into place. I did loosen this back up just because I was having issues being able to squeeze our crossbar in. So let's get that first bolt lined up. On this side, we'll put a lock washer and our nut. Just get that started for now, and then I'll get the bolt over here started. Then we can install the rest of them. Now we'll tighten all of our bolts down. You'll need a 3/4 inch socket and a 3/4 inch wrench. Before I torque these bolts all the way down, I want to go back and retorque this bracket just because I want that to be in the place that it came from. So I'll get these tightened down again, go over them once again with a torque wrench, and then I'll torque the 6 bolts that we just put in. Now we're going to take this bracket. This will be to relocate this alarm here. So we'll take that same bolt that we removed from that nut that we kept when we cut around it. Thread that in. And then our included bolt and nut. We'll go through this top hole that used to have a push pin in it. And we'll get those tightened down, and I'll show you how we'll mount that alarm. So here we have that alarm. There's two T27 bolts holding it into this bracket. We'll remove those, but keep track of them. We will reuse them. Behind our new bracket, and then we'll just have to reinstall those two bolts through those same holes. We're all set up. While the fascia is still off, however, it's a good idea to start running your any other flat toe components that you might be adding on, whether it be diode lights or your braking system. So that's what I'll be doing at this point. We will have to trim the fascia a bit just to get it fit over the base plate. So when it comes to that, I will show you what we did. But for now, I'm just going to set up our other systems and then we'll come back. Okay, so we got to get our fascia prepared for trimming. First, we'll have to remove these little fasteners here. I already have that one removed, but I think the easiest way is to just get a pair of side cutters, kind of wiggle it off. If you just work your way around, they'll usually pop off. And we'll get all four of those removed, and then this plastic piece will slide right out. With that last one removed, we'll slide this out, and we'll set it aside. We will not be reusing this. So with the help of an extra set of hands, I got this lifted up into place, and it's being held up by the rubber. I know this is pretty much centered where it's going to line up once we fully install it. So at this point, I can mark out, it's behind the grill, you can see the base plate. So I'm gonna mark out everywhere that I know I'll need to cut. And I'll just work my way over each component that's going to be sticking out. I'll usually start by cutting out whatever is sticking out the farthest, then mock it back up again, just to make sure I'm getting the cleanest cut that I possibly can. So I'll go through this a few times. I just like to mark everything so I kind of have my bearings. So I'm just making sure that everything's just about lined up with where it needs to be. And I'm gonna cut around our safety cable loop now with a pair of tin snips. That does take quite a bit of force to be able to cut it, but it will cut through. And then on these little corners, these should be a little easier to cut. So I'll just work my way around this safety cable loop and get it cut up. And once we're able to get past that point, we can move on to where our arms will pop in. So I've got everything cut out just about as good as I could get it. There is a huge void over on this side. I wasn't super happy about it, but with all of these parts being so close together, I don't think there was a way around that. But everything else looks pretty good. I may have to make some minor cuts once I go to fully reinstall the fascia. But first, I'll have to kind of peel it back because we can't forget to plug in those wires over on this side and also hook up the washer fluid hose. So once I get everything reinstalled, it's just the reverse of the way we took it off. We'll come back and I'll show you our completed setup. Now with the fascia reinstalled, I did have to make just some minor cuts just to make everything fit properly. But other than that, we're ready to hook up and get on the road. So that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the Roadmaster base plate on our 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe.